Hello, everybody. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about QuarkID and what it's doing in Argentina, specifically Buenos Aires, and basically how this technology is interfacing with the local identification and documentation system here in Buenos Aires and how that looks. And without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, what is QuarkID? Well, QuarkID is basically it's a decentralized identity platform where you have access over your keys and you can then have different, basically, it's kind of like an NFT, but it's not exactly an NFT. You can have basically a credential, and this credential could be a marriage license or a license to practice, I don't know, law, for example. On top of that, you also have things like your birth certificate, um, identification and documentation, practically. And right now, it is live and it's integrated with the Buenos Aires app. So it is actually already in practice for a good number of people here in the capital of Argentina. And the vision, it's to empower individuals and self-sovereign identity. Um, and I think that Argentina is they're big on cryptocurrency and kind of trying to give people an option to be somewhat individualists and not rely entirely on the government. There's some level of distrust surrounding that in my opinion. So without further ado, let's move forward. What's the problem that QuarkID basically is trying to solve? So a government database, first of all, it's centralized, and users have very limited control over their personal data. And that creates issues. One of them is that hacking can be a big problem. And we saw in the United States, for example, that when there's a large database of information on people, hackers are incentivized to take advantage of that. And it's quite possible that it could happen. The other, in my opinion, maybe more exciting, or I don't know if it's more important, but for me, more exciting is the problem that is getting solved really is the inefficient verification process for services. So let's say that I have um, a specific type of license or a specific type of documentation. At this point, you have to submit that, and it's this kind of manual process that takes a long time, and there's room for error. There's room for user error. And with the QuarkID, it's a lot easier than that, and you're able to basically verify things using zero knowledge proofs without revealing your other information to people. It's less intrusive and it's actually more efficient. So that part of it I find extremely interesting. And QuarkID isn't exactly doing this, but there's as you can probably imagine, tons of interesting implications for this and health insurance, all sorts of insurance, licensing, documentation, etc. So that's partly why I find this project so interesting. And the citizens, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, they would prefer more ownership over their data. I think there is a level of distrust for government, a healthy level, which I think is a good thing. And we should strive to have ownership over our data, in my opinion, and ownership over things like our assets, etc. So from an ideological point of view, um, that's what some people want, and I would venture to say that's what the majority of people would want. But it also outside of this ideological ownership of data and ownership of things like that, it streamlines processes and it makes it more simple and easier to get things done in what's typically a bureaucratic nightmare. So that's valuable as well. What is decentralized identity? So decentralized identity uses the blockchain to store credentials. Okay, and it's powered by decentralized identifiers, and they're unique, private, tamper-proof IDs. And the zero knowledge proofs ensure that the data ensure of data privacy while verifying information. So I'm not really equipped to go into the mathematical side of zero knowledge proofs. There's plenty of good information out there about it, but basically what happens is it lets you verify certain aspects of your identity without revealing your complete identity. So let's say I need to verify that I'm married to somebody, I'm married to another Argentine citizen, let's say, okay? I can then verify that without giving away where I live, how much I make, et cetera, et cetera. So as I mentioned before, QuarkID, it is integrated with the Buenos Aires app at this moment. And it provides access to 60 plus official documents. Your DNI, which of course is very important here, birth certificates, licenses, etc. It's fully decentralized. No central entity can monitor the usage of it, so that's pretty interesting. And kudos to the people here that kind of pushed forward on that and made that happen. I think it's a big step, not just for Argentina, but for the world in general, and self-sovereignty and self-sovereignty specifically over your data, which of course, in my opinion, is important, as I've said probably 3 times already, but I digress. How it works. Citizens manage the documents using the private keys stored in a digital wallet. So you can then basically have control over your documents to an extent that wasn't possible before. And the blockchain-based verification ensures the authenticity, and it doesn't compromise on privacy or anything like that. So people are basically able to say, hey, this is real, this is, the truth, what you're saying is the truth, but we're not going to look further into it because we have these cool things called zero knowledge proofs that tell us all we need to know without knowing everything about you. So again, that's truly amazing. And the adoption of QuarkID here in Buenos Aires. So there's been 3.6 million residents onboarded, probably more now, but and it's part of the city's digital transformation strategy, which we can get more into in another video, but I think it's an important step there, and it boosts government efficiency and user trust, which again is important here. And the government could always use more efficiency, especially in American countries, I would say. And it's the first city globally to implement a blockchain-based citizen identity at this scale. So it's a big news for blockchains, and it's big news for Argentina as well. Key use cases: government services, voting eligibility, and accessing benefits or subsidies. So, for example, you could verify your income without giving away more information than you need to, which of course is very, very important. On top of that, another use case would be private sector applications like simplified KYC for banks or for brokerage accounts, and secure authentication for loyalty programs or healthcare services. Of course, there's subsidized healthcare here, and that is, a use case there. And travel and cross-border transactions. And these credentials can be used internationally, so that opens the door. And hopefully, once more places start adopting this type of technology, it'll become more and more intertwined, and that type of stuff will be easily integrated and more efficient. So what's the technology behind QuarkID? How does it work? Why does it work? Well, it's built on ZK-Era, which is an Ethereum L2, and it basically uses the security of Ethereum to verify these transactions, you could call them. But basically, it's verifying the authenticity of various documents, and they're using zero knowledge proof, so it's scalable, it's cheap, it's easy to do, and it's an open source framework. So it's developed. There's people within the government here in Buenos Aires that helped develop it, and it's got international standards, and so it's really a top of the line product, and it's ripe for use in other cities and other countries as well. What's the importance of this? Well, for one, it empowers citizens, and they can reduce their dependency on centralized authorities. We all know how frustrating it is to try to deal with bureaucracy, so that's very important. And the privacy first design, so it protects sensitive information. Whoever was really behind building this, they cared about privacy. And coming from a privacy first design, I think that makes the product that much more special, especially when it's implemented by a government, which they're not necessarily incentivized to give their citizens an abundance of privacy, but the citizens want it, and that's what they're getting now. So I find that very encouraging and very impressive from the government here in Buenos Aires. And the big thing, the privacy is huge, okay? Don't get me wrong, but the efficiency gains, I think, is really where people are going to start saying, okay, we need to start implementing this more and more, because if you can reduce the bureaucracy and delay times, or reduce delays in document verification, then you're going to save one, government resources, so the government's going to save money, and you're going to save people time. Those two things, that's, in my opinion, is what's going to spread adoption, because the government wants to save money. People don't want to deal with bureaucracy. If you can solve both of those things with one solution, well, people are going to be incentivized to then use that solution. And furthermore, what's the global significance? It's recognized as a digital public good by the UN, and it's contributing to basically an image of the future that looks very good for citizens, and I think it's very important all around. And so that's basically more or less all I have, but let's look at the challenges and the future potential. So the challenges: educating citizens on digital wallets and blockchains. I think a lot of this can be abstracted away, where you don't really feel like you're using a blockchain or a digital wallet and you're just using an app. So as long as we can abstract that away and make it as simple as possible, and reduce the bureaucracy and improve the efficiency of everything, I think that would basically allow for citizens to learn how to use this tool and be educated on it. And of course, you have to make sure that the security is tight and the private key management is tight, and the potential. There's expansion for private companies and broader adoption, and there's a blueprint for other cities and nations. So like I was mentioning earlier with the healthcare thing, that's not currently being implemented, but I really think that there's an opening there. For example, let's say I want to prove that I qualify for a certain surgery, but I don't want to give you all my health information. Theoretically, you could use this technology to do something like that. Now, it's not implemented, but I think that would really reduce the friction in the medical space, and I see that as a potential for this technology. And as for blueprint for other cities and nations, we kind of went over that. All that we really need to do is show that it works here, and we can move forward with trying to integrate with other countries. Conclusions. It really, QuarkID, it really demonstrates how the blockchain can revolutionize identity management. And I think an important part of this is that we need to abstract away the blockchain. Okay. A lot of people, they don't find that interesting. That's not important to them. So what's important to them is that um, things are easy, and they have control over their own documentation. That's what's important. So we have to abstract the blockchain kind of away from it. And it's important for Buenos Aires because it's setting a global precedent, and I find that very encouraging to have these type of digital transformations occurring here in Buenos Aires. And I think that if it's any indication of future progression, we're on a good track. And I think there's a future where individuals, not organizations, own their identity, and that's kind of what QuarkID is going for, and hopefully we can increase adoption and push that goal forward. So thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.